Hello, my name is Curtis S. Arnold, and today, for your listening pleasure, we'll be reading Teleparted. Julian, would you please get that? Tiffany asked her husband as he leaned up from his recliner and made a move to the phone. Yes, dear. He grabbed the phone in his hand and draped the cord over his lap. Hello, Truman residence. There was no sound on the other end besides the pops and clicks of static that came through the line. Who is it, darling? Tiffany asked. Her husband put down the phone, back onto the receiver, and leaned back in his chair. No one, dear. He turned the volume up to the television and kicked up his feet. Must have been a wrong number. Tiffany shrugged and went back to kneading the bread dough she had laid out on the counter, but no sooner than had she started again did the phone ring. Now, who in the world? Julian picked up the phone again. He leaned over to his left without breaking his comfortable position and asked, Who is this? There was a heavy breathing on the other line and a huffing sound that filled the earpiece as Julian pressed it to his head. His eyes went wide as he heard the voice on the other end. It's me, it spoke softly. It's your daughter. Julian dropped the phone from his hand and pushed himself from his chair. Tiffany looked over to him and asked, What's wrong? Who was it? Julian responded with a look of terror across his brow. Tiffany hastily dried her hands on a towel before she came into the living room and picked up the phone. Hello? She asked as she put it to her head. Who is this? It's Stephanie, a girl's voice replied. Don't you recognize my voice? Tears came into Tiffany's eyes. Stephanie? She asked with a wavering voice. How is this possible? Before she could say another word, her husband snatched the phone from her hand and shouted, Now I don't know who the hell this is, but you're some kind of sicko if you think pretending to be our kidnapped daughter is any fun. Julian slammed the phone down onto the receiver, and Tiffany broke into tears. Come here, Julian said as he wrapped his arms around his wife. It's just a... Tiffany broke into sobs as Julian picked up the phone. Who the hell? Don't you remember me? The voice asked. Don't you remember your daughter? The voice became agitated as Julian's hand shook. If you're really Stephanie, he took a deep breath. What year were you born? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Julian felt a sense of relief, but only for a moment. July 5th. 1992. I was only 12 years old. The voice rose, and Julian's stomach sank. Please, he said desperately, just leave us alone. Julian placed the phone back down onto the table and went to Tiffany, who sat on the couch with her head in her hands. He placed a calming hand on her back when suddenly there was a loud knock on the front door. Startled, they both jumped up from the couch and stared at one another for a moment. There was another knock, louder than the last. Julian started toward the door, but Tiffany grabbed his wrist. Are you crazy? What if what? Julian asked. What if she's alive? He shook his head and scratched at his beard. There's no way. I made sure. Tiffany picked at her fingernails nervously. Julian pointed. Go to the kitchen and wait for me there. Tiffany nodded and left Julian standing mere feet from the door, and no sooner than had she walked away was there another loud knock, only this time it was a relentless pounding that shook the door in its frame. Julian carefully grabbed the doorknob and twisted it as the hammering continued. He pulled the door open quickly, letting the knob hit the coat rack on the wall behind it, and stared out into the empty night. There was no one on the doorstep, nor in the driveway, and the night was calm and cool. Julian shrugged and closed the door, but when he turned around, he was face to face with Stephanie. She was no longer 12, and had grown in the 3 years that she had been missing. Oh, Jesus! He clutched his heart and skipped a beat as he quickened. How is this possible? his daughter asked, clear as day. Tiffany came out of the kitchen and dropped the loaf pan she was carrying. It fell to the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces before her feet, and she clasped her hands to her mouth. Are you surprised? Stephanie asked as she smiled at her parents. She smoothed the nightgown she was wearing. You shouldn't be. I told you I'd be back. Julian shook his head. Darling, this isn't possible. The police, they said your kidnapper had killed me? Stephanie asked. She raised a brow, then scoffed. Or is that just what you told the police happened? Julian's mouth went dry, and Tiffany paled as they looked on and listened. You see, that night, Stephanie started as she walked toward her father. The night you killed me, that is. I said I'd come back for you. Don't you remember that? Tiffany blinked. Stephanie, you were sick, she exclaimed shakily from the kitchen. Stephanie looked to her mother. So? She asked, approaching her. Did that mean you had to kill me? Did that mean you had to take your little girl's life? Tiffany was crying as Stephanie approached her. No, that's... Shut up, you stupid bitch! Stephanie shouted. As she screamed, pieces of the loaf pan rose from the floor, stuck themselves into Tiffany's body at odd angles, with one shard landing in her throat and another in her left eye. You never loved me, Stephanie said slyly. I was just your little psycho. Tiffany fell to the floor and tried to pull the glass pieces from her body, but Stephanie raised a hand and the pieces went further into her flesh until she fell fully and landed on her back. There was a rattling sound from the other side of the room, and Stephanie turned to see Julian, fear-stricken, attempting to open the door. And so you killed me, Stephanie said as she waved a hand and forced her father against the wall near the foyer, pinning his back against the coat rack. The sound of crunching ribs as the pegs pressed through his chest was delightful to Stephanie. You took a knife and you stabbed me, but you didn't stop, did you, Daddy? Please? Julian choked on blood. You? Shh, she whispered as she put her hands onto her father's chest and forced him further onto the rack behind him, listening to him die. When she was satisfied, Stephanie swung the door open and stepped out into the cool night. She inhaled deeply, letting the door swing shut behind her, and used her hand to lock it from the inside. Stephanie smiled and vanished into the air, leaving her mother and father to bleed. Thank you for listening. My name is Curtis S. Arnold, and this has been Teleparted. Thank you, and good night.